This is the Bema Podcast with Marty Solomon. I'm his co-host, Brent Billings. Today, we will be giving an overview of the book of Leviticus.
There's a couple ways we can do this, Brent Billings. There is the verse-by-verse journey, where you just do every law, every jot, every tittle, everything that's said, and you unpack it all. Or we can do a 10,000-foot view, where we step back and we try to understand Leviticus as a comprehensive whole. And that is the way we're going to do this. We're going to do one episode for Leviticus for our session 1 journey.
You know, I was making the distinction in our original episode about the difference between a 10,000-foot view and a 30,000-foot view.
Yeah.
But I think at this point we should modernize our reference a little bit. And maybe we say the 100-kilometer view on Blue Origin or something.
Yeah, sure.
You're technically going to space, but you're not going to orbit.
Yeah, I love that.
Something like that.
I love that. It was already like the flight nerd in you had come out in the first original episode. Now it's just taking a whole nother turn by the time we got here years later. I love it.
Yep. Space nerd too.
Yep. Absolutely.
Too many nerderies.
Yes. Well, there's a lot of, I remember when I did this original episode, I didn't really have a whole lot to recommend in ways of Leviticus resources. I've encountered a few that are pretty good. One that I'll recommend here for our purposes today is Covenant and Conversation. Covenant and Conversation was a lot of things by Rabbi Jonathan Sacks. Rabbi Jonathan Sacks was a chief rabbi in the UK for a long time. Died not too many years ago as we record this. And he just made huge contributions to the modern Jewish rabbinical conversation. He wrote a Covenant and Conversation book for all 5 books of Torah. It's basically 4 to 6 essays on each of the parashah readings, which we'll talk parashah some other time. But anyway, it's his commentary on Leviticus, and there's some really fun, juicy little bits in there. That'd be one recommendation. I've got a couple others that people have given me as well, in addition to what I have read that I'm really confident about, but I haven't gone through them yet. So for now, today, we will recommend Covenant and Conversation, the Leviticus volume, which has a name.
The Book of Holiness.
Yeah, there you go. The Book of Holiness. So we'll link that in the show notes. You can get quick access to that. They also have it for free, I've been told, on Sefaria. So we may link that as well. I'm a guy who likes a nice hard copy of a book in my library that I can highlight and pull off a shelf. But if you prefer the other, we'll get some links in the show notes for that. So
yeah, I usually throw the Amazon link in there just because most people have Amazon. Of course, you are welcome to buy it from wherever you like. But yeah, in this case, there's also just a free version. So if you just want to browse around and check it out, Safari is a great resource for that.
Absolutely. All right. So those links will be there. I'm not going to do a review today. We've wasted enough time. I'm just going to dive right in. How do you feel about that, Brent?
Is this wasting time? I don't know.
Well, we're trying not to talk too much longer in these reboot episodes than we did the first time around. So we got a presentation today that's going to help you if you are not driving, if you're in a place where you want to pull up that presentation, that PDF. You might find some things here and there that are helpful. But we're going to talk about the book of Leviticus. So we see there a nice little photograph of a makeshift tabernacle that's out in the middle of the desert today in the land of Israel.
I'll try to throw this in the chapter art too, so you might see it in your podcast app right now.
Beautiful. I love that. But we've talked about this tabernacle in a few different ways. It's going to set us up for our conversations in Leviticus today. We've talked about the tabernacle as a honeymoon suite. I mean, we did a whole episode under the chuppah. We talked about all the wedding and marriage imagery that was in the story that led up to the tabernacle. And in that regard, if you wanted to keep looking at the story through that lens, in that way, you could say that the tabernacle is a honeymoon suite. It's where the relationship is consummated in some level. You could say, you could look at things like on the inside of the tabernacle, there is the table of showbread. That's what it was always called to me in Bible college, the table of showbread. The Hebrew there refers to the table of faces, which speaks of, in the Hebraic rabbinic conversation, this place where your two faces are so there's this intimacy, there's this relationship, there is this table of communion, not communion in the Lord's Supper sense, but we are communing together, these two parties. And so there's intimacy, there's relationship, there's a honeymoon suite. You can look at the tabernacle that way. You can also look at the tabernacle, we said just an episode or two ago, as a retelling of the creation story. The tabernacle is like a mobile Genesis 1 through 3, we said. It's like you're packing up the story and taking it with you, because you have 7 and the Lord says, you've got Sabbath, you've got the tree of life behind a curtain guarded by cherubim, you've got all the things. You've got yourself, we did that a couple episodes ago. You can do it that way. But you could also talk about the tabernacle, and I've always kind of loved this, and I also completely hate this. I came up with this idea, and I was like, I also just hate this so much. So I love it and I hate it. But Leviticus is the owner's manual in the glove box of the tabernacle. And here's why I say that. Well, first I'll tell you why I hate it. I hate this idea that the Bible is like, it's the owner manual for life. It's Bible. It's basic instructions before leaving Earth. Like, I hate that concept. Just hate it. So I hate describing the Bible as an owner's manual. But in this case, here's why I find this metaphor helpful. They have just been rescued from Egypt. They've sat at the bottom of Mount Sinai. Moses is giving them Torah, and they get the instruction to build this huge tent in the middle of the desert. Which, when you think about it, Brent, that's weird, right? Like, of all the things you could do in the desert, like survival ranks up there at the top of the list. But then build a really big tent that you're going to take down and move with you wherever you go. Like a mobile
not
temple.
So practical for a nomadic people.
Yeah, it's a weird thing, and it's really not that weird, but it is. Sometimes we don't see the weirdness in it, and if that's the case, we should back up and be like, oh, that's kind of weird. But then it also raises a whole bunch of questions, which is, okay, I just built this temple, but I don't know what to do. Like, okay, like the book of Exodus tells me how to build it. What do I do with it? Okay, I built this. It's like I picture them getting done and kind of standing back and like giving each other high fives, like, yes, a job well done, complete. And then they go, and now what? And Leviticus is, in some ways, it's that owner's manual in the glove box. Well, although here's how you use it. Here's what it's for. Leviticus ends up being your manual, your manual and instruction on priesthood. And so I want to go deeper with this idea. And to do that, Brent, I'm going to have you take us back to Exodus. Seems like the wrong direction. But remind us of Exodus 19, 5 through 6.
Okay, I'll do that, Marty. But I just want to affirm your analogy here.
Okay.
Because think about this. This is impossible to think about in much the same way that it is very difficult for us to think in an Eastern way. Imagine being given a car and having never seen a car before.
Sure, exactly.
And then you're trying to like read through this owner's manual and like figure out what to do with it.
Right, absolutely.
And you've never seen one work before. Yeah, it's a challenge. So yeah, I think it's a good analogy.
Yep. Okay.
Although I wonder if in 20 years if anybody's even going to know what a glove box is, because they're just going to Uber everywhere.
That's true.
Okay. Anyway, Exodus 19, 5 through 6. This was one of my memory verses in our 2016 trip, actually.
Ooh, excellent.
Now, if you obey me fully and keep my covenant, then out of all nations you will be my treasured possession. Although the whole earth is mine, you will be for me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words you are to speak to the Israelites.
So those words from God as they arrived at Mount Sinai, and two little elements in there that just reinforce what we've already been talking about. He says, you will be my treasured possession. We've already kind of mentioned that's marital language. So you have that marriage language, that intimacy, that honeymoon suite picture. But then God says, you will be for me, although the whole earth is mine, you'll be for me a kingdom of priests. A kingdom of priests. What is that? And to go back to what you just said, Brent, imagine getting a manual for a car, but you've never even seen a car before. And that's the kind of question you have to wrestle with here. For them, what does God mean by that? What is a priest? I mean, on one level, it's not that they've never seen a car before. Like, they've seen priests. They've seen Egyptian priests. Is that what God means? Does God want us to be a kingdom of priests that are like Egyptian? Am I supposed to assume Egyptian priesthood? Am I supposed to assume Babylonian priesthood? Remember, there wasn't a priesthood that the patriarchs necessarily had. There was some weird interaction. What is a priest? Is it like Melchizedek? Is it like the Egyptians? And then he says this kingdom of priests. Well, that's weird. because I think we take that phrase for granted because we're so used to it, a kingdom of priests. But a kingdom has priests. It's not a kingdom of priests. You want us to be an entire kingdom of priests? Like the whole kingdom is priests? Like we're all priests? But a whole kingdom, not just a kingdom that has a priesthood. You want a whole kingdom of priesthood. And so that's what they have to start grappling with. And Leviticus is here. God says, don't worry. I love these questions, but I have sent you the book of Leviticus for this very purpose. And so that's how we want to look at Leviticus today. It's kind of an outline for this concept of God's calling me to be a priest. And what does that mean? And so Leviticus, if you go to your presentation, you get that Exodus 19 passage that Brent just read us. And then we're going to start walking through these sections here in your presentation. First section here is a section on atonement. Leviticus section 1. It's going to be chapters 1 through 7, give or take. These are loose definitions, by the way. But the first section of Leviticus deals with sacrifices. And it seems really bloody, and it seems really barbaric, and it seems really like some other world somewhere over there and all this violence and killing of animals. But they were used to this world, like every country they'd ever been in. Egyptian, they slaughtered animals. Well, and some people have made the point, like Egypt probably did a whole lot less of that because of the way that but nevertheless, sacrifice, not a foreign concept, is my larger point. Babylonia, land of the Amorites, Hittites, animal sacrifice, not a foreign concept to them. God shows up and he says, here's what I require, and here's all that I require. And this thing that God gives them to do is not this crazy, outlandish, super in-depth process. I think a lot of times we think, and we'll come back to this here in a moment, I think a lot of us think that every time somebody sinned, every time they realized they did something, somebody had to show up with an animal. Like when I was raised as a Christian, I was given these pictures of the tabernacle and the temple. It was just Jews everywhere, just slaughtering animals for all the sin that's been committed. You have in this Levitical system a sin offering in the morning and a sin offering in the evening. One goat for the whole nation. Now, there are special sacrifices that we'll talk about here in a moment, but one goat for the whole nation in the morning and the evening. This is not a God that's demanding all of this sacrifice, all this violence, all this blood. This is a God that is giving you a way to make sure that you know you're right before him. And I love that Leviticus starts here, because you would think you would dive into what it means to be a priest. But instead, the story starts here. Leviticus starts here, because I have to start with this idea of I have to make things right. I have to have a clean conscience. I have to restore my relationship with God, because if I don't start here, if I don't start with atonement, if I don't start by making things right between God and I, then everything else that I do is going to be performative. It's going to be production-based. This should carry, in my mind, the same energy as Sabbath. Trust the story. Trust that you're loved. This should carry the same energy as grace, as a God who walks the blood path. Leviticus starts here. It says, before we go anywhere, before we talk about what you're going to wear or what you can eat or what you need to do, let's make sure that that is not connected to whether or not you and I are okay. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to make us okay. We're going to do the atonement thing first, so that everything else we talk about can be disconnected from making things right. And in the Christian world, we would say things like saved by grace. Same principle right here in Leviticus. We experience grace first, and the things that we do after that, not performative, not attached to atonement, something else. But atonement is where the story begins.
And I think this is something familiar for people in modern context. I think for me, it shows up most often in my marriage. But like if there's something going on between me and Maggie and we're trying to do something else, well, that's not really going to get anywhere.
Right.
Like we gotta start with making our relationship right, restore whatever the problem is.
Yes.
And then we can move on to the other stuff. So I think this makes sense. And I think this would apply to a lot of relationships in those sorts of situations.
Absolutely. I love that. Beautiful connection. Then we have the next section, Leviticus section 2, and we'll call this the section on priesthood. In fact, we always, like in discussion groups back with college students, we used to always jokingly call this the priest witch, which feels like something I would find at Jimmy John's, the Priestwich. I don't know about you. I always order the Unwich at Jimmy John's. So the Priestwich just makes me think of, I'll have, chips and a drink.
The Priestwich is certainly a kosher sandwich, though, right?
It is, absolutely, absolutely. But we always call it the Priestwich because there was 2 sections of priesthood with something in the middle that we'll talk about next. But you had like the bread of the Priestwich was these 2 sections, Leviticus 8 through 10, chapters 8 through 10, and then Leviticus 21 and 22 were these sections on priesthood. The first section is what a priest wears and how they conduct themselves and what, like the special rules that they're going to live by. They're going to live by more rules than the average everyday non-priest Israelite. They have an additional set of rules that they have to follow. The back half of that, the other section of Leviticus 21 and 22, is essentially what happens when the priest fails. Like, what do you do when the priest makes a mistake? Because that feels like maybe a bigger deal. So what do you do with that? And it's in these sections where we can really find, if you go to your next slide, we can really start to answer this question, what is a priest? And I love to talk about this. It was taught to me at some point by one of my teachers as the 4-fold role of priesthood. There are essentially 4 things, and I've seen this not necessarily packaged the same way in other sources, but I've seen these elements talked about in lots of other sources, Jewish and Christian alike. The 4-fold role of, there are 4 jobs that the priest has. The first job is this: you're going to put God on display. We got a depiction of the high priest. That's not every priest. That's the high priest that's on your slide there that you're seeing a picture of. When you look at that, Brent, is that how you would imagine, this is what I would imagine walking around the desert. This is wandering the desert garb right here.
Yeah. Yeah. That looks a little uncomfortable perhaps for the desert, or even really just for any setting.
Yeah. And I've had a couple people make, I have a high priest outfit. I won't call it a costume. That's probably more appropriate though, but I'll wear it for different teachings, and it's made of the same material. It's made of 100% linen. You'd be amazed how comfortable that is. Like when you put it on, you're like, oh, this is so heavy. It breathes like so well. I'm so impressed. God knew what he was doing. Anyway, I digress. It is an odd outfit to imagine wandering around the desert. And that's because part of your job as a priest is you're going to put God on display. What does that mean? That means God looks different. God is different. God is not like all the other gods of the world. God's different. And so the priest's job is to not be like every other Israelite. The priest's job is to look different. If every Israelite looks like this and wears that, then the priest is going to look different than that. The priest is going to wear something else. Because when you look at the priest, your job is to go, oh yeah, that's what God is like. Oh yeah, that's what God is like. Oh yeah, that's what God is like. And so this same principle was something that all the Jews were supposed to follow. And we'll get to that in the next section. But one of the things that they do is they wear tassels. Right now, nobody can see this because we're an audio medium, but I'm wearing tassels, my talit, as a Jewish follower of Jesus. And on my talit are 4 tassels. And in every tassel, there is a blue thread, because that's what God said to do in Numbers chapter 15. Put tassels on the corners of your garment. Make sure there's a blue thread in it. So all Jews Torah observant Jews wear talit, and they have tassels on them. And if they choose to have the blue thread in it, that blue thread, what color is the robe in that picture there on our slide, Brent?
Blue.
Blue is the color of priesthood. And so in every tassel, you have one thread, the color of priesthood, that reminds you of your call to be a kingdom of priests. And this tassel has 8 threads in it, 7 of them white, 1 of them blue. 7 white, 1 blue. It's a reminder that if the rest of the nations look like this, I'm supposed to look different. If the rest of the nations are like the white threads, I'm supposed to be a blue thread in a white tassel. It's that concept of putting God on display. God wants you to simply look different because your covenantal role, your mission, is to be a walking billboard for God. A reminder when people see you, like a string on a finger, like a rubber band you wear on your wrist to remind you of something. We are that walking billboard and reminder of who God is and what God is like. The second role is to help people navigate their atonement. So your job as a priest when people come and they don't know, like they don't own the book of Leviticus. They don't have BibleGateway.com. They don't have a printing press. They don't have the book of Leviticus memorized back in the day when they first got it. And so they come to the temple and they've wronged their brother. And so they come to make a fellowship offering, or maybe they've come to the temple because they want to say thank you and they're here to celebrate and they want to give a Thanksgiving offering, a grain offering to God. And you're there to help them navigate that process. You look at what they bring and you say, yeah, that's exactly what you're supposed to bring. Or maybe you say, oh, it's not supposed to be that. It's supposed to be a male goat. You've brought a female. It's supposed to be a year-old. This is what, go back and get this. Or maybe they say, okay, here's what we're going to do with, you've brought a grain offering. Here's what we're going to do with the grain. Here's why. You help people now. You walk them through that process. Your job is to not show up and make sure they're following the rules. Your job is to help them navigate the process that God's laid out in front of them so that at the end of this process, I put it this way in my notes. The priest helps you offer the situational sacrifice. The priest uses rules to minister to the worshiper. The rules are not the end. The rules are the means by which you can find freedom. You can find atonement. The priest is walking you from a guilty conscience to a clean conscience, from one side to another. There are offerings that are fellowship offerings. And nobody ever explained this stuff to me. There are offerings where you come with the person that you've offended and you bring them to the temple and you have an offering, and part of the offering gets burned up on the altar and it goes to God. But the other part of the offering, you sit down with you and the other party that you've offended and a priest, and you eat. You have like a little meal together to make things right. Like this isn't just a bunch of killing, slaughtering, blood, throwing animals on the fire. Like there is a process to these sacrifices, and the priest is there to help you understand that process, walk through that process in order to find that freedom. That's the idea of the priest helping you navigate your atonement.
And even a lot of the other offerings that are not fellowship offerings, like the priests are still using those offerings.
Absolutely.
Because the tribe of Levi doesn't have like their own stuff. They're being contributed to by the rest of the community, and that's their food.
Yep.
That's their grocery store, essentially.
Yeah, absolutely. That's how they're provided for in the Levitical system.
And I never understood any of that stuff.
Yeah.
Like the idea that any of it was ever consumed by a human was, I just never aware of that.
Yeah, that's a great point. All right, so that's two of the priest's roles. First role is that they put God on display. Second role is that they help people navigate their atonement. The third role is that the priest intercedes on behalf of other people. And here's what that means. If you go to the next slide, you're going to see a little arrow down there, a little diagram. The priest sits in between God and Israel. So you have the people of Israel and you have the God of Israel, and the priest stands in the gap. And the priest goes both directions. They truly intercede. They plead God's case on behalf, like to the people. Like they go to the people and they say, this is what God wants. This is why that's important. This is what we need to do. And they're working on God's behalf. They're working on God's behalf for the people. But then the priest is also turning around and working on the people's behalf before God. So it's the priest that intercedes and pleads and prays for and says, God, forgive the people. When Moses is on Mount Sinai, Moses, a descendant of Levi, by the way, when Moses is on Mount Sinai and he says to God, God, don't hurt them. Blot my name out of the book of life, but don't hurt your people. He's doing the job of a priest in that moment. That is a very priestly role. He's interceding on behalf of people. He's trying to find a loophole. He's trying to get them off the hook. He's trying to help them find salvation, and he's trying to make sure that the relationship between the people and God are right. And so if you go to the next slide, you will see what Israel's supposed to. You can see how this micro level starts to work out and teach the rest of us what we're supposed to do. Because if the priest stands between Israel and God, and Israel is supposed to be a kingdom of priests, well, then Israel now understands my job is to stand between God and the nations, God and the world. My job is to plead God's case to the world in very unique, compassionate, pastoral ways, and to plead the world's case before God. It's my job as a priest is to intercede on behalf of others. And then the fourth role of priesthood, so we got putting God on display, it's number one. Number two, helping people navigate their atonement. Number 3, interceding on behalf of others. And number 4, distribute resources to those in need. There are always going to be some people that don't have enough. And there's going to always be people that have more than enough. And our job is to share those things, and the priesthood runs those systems that help do that. They also take things like the first fruits and the tithes and all the things that God had worked into the harvest season. And there's all these things that God does for the alien, the orphan, and the widow. We'll talk about that more when we get to the book of Deuteronomy. But there's all these things you do, and the priest kind of oversees and facilitates that system. It's this distributive justice. It's this making sure that people have in God's household that God is taking care of all of his kids. That's the job of priests. So those four roles. And that's what we see in the priest witch. But the priest witch implies that there's something in the middle.
What an interesting word, Marty.
and that would be Leviticus section 3, which is all these chapters. It's Leviticus chapters 11 through 20. And it's all these chapters about what it means to live as a priest. Not for the priesthood, but for me as one of these kingdom of priest members. So it's about eating kosher. It's about what's clean and unclean and allowed and not allowed, permissible and unpermissible to eat. It's about the clothes that I can wear. It's about how my clothes have to be of the same fiber. Can't be 60-40 blend. It has to be 100%. It has to be 100% linen. It has to be 100% wool. It has to be 100% whatever it is. For us, it'd be cotton or polyester, or it has to be 100% the same material. Not allowed to blend it. Not allowed to mix.
Take 10 items out of your drawer right now and look at the tags and see how many of them are 100%.
Oh, goodness gracious.
And just think, I'd have to throw this away if I was Jewish.
And I got to tell you, as a Jewish follower of Jesus, all the comfy shirts that you have, they're 60-40 blend. That's what makes them so comfy. Oh, this drives me crazy. But yeah, so good. And then you have things like, well, how I can farm my fields. I'm not allowed to put two different crops in my field. I have to put one seed at a time in a field. And then there's how I'm going to engage in relationships and sexual relationships and what I'm going to do and what I'm not going to do. There's all these things that I do. And it's because, if you went back to that last, 2 slides ago, it's because I'm a priest for the rest of the world. It's not because these things are inherently bad. Is there anything inherently wrong with pork? Not necessarily. Did you have any pork this morning, Brent? I know you like your bacon.
Not this morning, but
you do like your bacon.
I do like it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'd be surprised if I don't have it at some point today.
Absolutely. And God asks his people to abstain from these things because he wanted them to be different. Now, a lot of people point out, well, in the ancient days, not eating pork would have been a healthy decision. Well, in the ancient days, not doing this would have been more healthy. But I think it is a mistake to say that's the reason behind kashrut, behind kosher law. Kosher law is about you becoming a distinct people, a peculiar people, a people that put God on display. Because there's a lot of laws that will have nothing to do with whether or not it's more healthy or not healthy. That line of reasoning won't roll the whole way out through the Levitical code. And so it may be kind of like an additional benefit in the ancient world, perhaps. But a lot of these things are not inherently wrong. They're the things that God says, I want you to be different. The whole rest of the world does this. And he literally says that in Leviticus 11 through 20. More than once, God is going to say, all the nations around you do this. That is why I'm asking you to, or like this, that is why I'm asking you to do this. God's going to keep saying, all the nations do this. I want you to be different. All the nations do this. I want you to be different. Why? Because we're putting God on display. Why? Because we're trying to tell the world what God is like. What makes our God different? Our God is a God of love. That's what we've been encountering, Brent, so far. Up to Leviticus, we've been encountering this God is a God who is 1,000 to 3, a God who will walk the blood path, a God who will put his bow up in the clouds. We've been finding a God that's full of grace and love, and the world needs to understand that this is who this God is. We're going to intercede on their behalf. We're going to try to tell them that God loves them. We're going to beg God to forgive all the nations of the world. We're going to distribute. We're going to meet needs. This is the job. And so Leviticus 11 through 20, it's not just a list of random arbitrary laws. Don't eat this. Don't wear that. Don't farm this way. Don't have that kind of relationship. It's a covenantal relationship. Because think about the priests in the nation of Israel. The priests had a bunch of extra rules. because they were being set apart. And that word for set apart is the word kadosh. Brent, can you remember what the word kadosh means?
Is that the word for holy?
Holy. Kadosh is holy, holiness, right? To be holy, to be set apart, to be different. So God asks his priests to be different than the Israelites. God asks the Israelites to be different than the nations. Is there anything wrong with the clothes that the Israelites are wearing? No, the priests are just supposed to wear a different kind of clothing. Is there anything wrong with? No, he just wants them to be set apart, to be different. That leads us to Leviticus section 4. Leviticus section 4 is a section on how to party. Chapters 23 through 24 is a whole section of Leviticus, Brent, that I was not told about. I was raised in a Christianity that taught me to beware of the party. Don't go to parties. Parties is where that's where all the sin happens. All the drinking and the debauchery and when you're little, when you're an adolescent, when you're a teenager, I get that. There's a proper warning. There's a proper whatever I'm trying to say about. I understand those things. But what got communicated to me over time is that the party is anti-God. What I was never taught in the church is that God was the one who ordained the party, the proper party. The party that's not about self-indulgence, but the party that's set aside to remind myself that creation's good, that I'm loved. The party that reminds myself to trust the story. Remember what was the center word in the Genesis 1 chiasm, Brent?
Moad.
Moad. Plural, moadim. And we said that word in the plural moadim was what? Brent, can you remember?
Seasons or sacred times.
Yes, seasons, sacred times. It's the word for festival. It's literally the word for parties, the festivals, the moadim. The moadim, Rabbi David Foreman will talk about the moadim. He'll do all these teaching series on the moadim. The moadim are the biblical festivals, the biblical parties. There's one party, the Day of Atonement, which is a somber assembly. It's solemn. It's a day of fasting, of repentance, of self-restraint. But all the other parties they're parties, Brent. God said, you will party or you will die. You will party or I will cut you off from your people. I was never told about the God that said, you will party or I will kill you. Like that wasn't a Bible lesson I ever heard in Sunday school. And yet Leviticus, there's a whole section of Leviticus, you have to know how to party. Because if you don't know how to party, if you don't know how to celebrate, if you don't know how to say yes to it's not about self-indulgence. It's about honoring God. It's about an act of worship. If you don't know how to pull out the stops, have good food, have great drink, have a wonderful time, how to turn the music up, how to celebrate together, well, then you're not tapping into the love and the acceptance and the grace of God. You have to remind yourself that the story is good, or it's going to be really hard to trust the story. You have to remind yourself of the truth of Sabbath, or you forget all about it. And so that's a whole section in Leviticus.
And I don't think I had as strict of a condemnation on partying as it sounds like you maybe did. I'm more self-imposed most of those things, I'm pretty sure. But even today, the idea that this is like a requirement still makes me a little uncomfortable about it.
Sure.
So having a way to having it laid out and say, this is how you should do it.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, it goes back to that section 1. Like, how do I know that I'm right with God? How do I know that I'm partying the way I'm supposed to? It pushes you. It's like, no, you need to come together as a community. You need to actually celebrate. You shouldn't be reserved.
Right.
It's refreshing.
Yeah. And I know this raises for a lot of people, this is going to raise a bunch of questions of, okay, so wait a minute, as a Christian, should I be observing the biblical festivals? And we'll get to all that later. We'll slow down. We'll get to that later. Trust me, we'll get to it later. Don't worry. Don't panic. Don't upend your whole life. We'll talk about all that stuff later in our journey through Bema. But the idea, the principle of throwing a God party is one that should transcend
exactly
all those other things.
Mm-hmm.
And that leads to the last section, Brent, section 5, which is a section on caring for the oppressed, right? So when you get done with the party, if you get done with a party that celebrates how much God loves you, how God has taken care of you, God's provision, God's blessing, God's mercy, and it doesn't make you want to turn around and show mercy, show love, show generosity, take care of other people, it's an indication you probably weren't celebrating the right kind of party. Like it wasn't actually changing you. It was just a party for you to indulge, for you to consume. But when you throw a God party, it changes you, and you then leave that party and you take that party with you. Like you give it. And so the next three chapters 25 through 27, the end of the book of Leviticus, are like the very next chapter after all these parties is the Sabbath year and the year of Jubilee. It's how you cancel debts and forgive all the people that owe you something. It's about letting the land lie fallow and not farming the land every 7 years. It's about every 50 years giving it all back. Like all the land that you somehow acquired, and you give it all back to the ancestral ownership. We're going to reset the clock. Why? Because God is good. Because his love and grace, his mercy is just free, and it's amazing, and I'm loved. And it's what God did for us, and so it's what we do for other people. And Leviticus 26 it feels a little off. Leviticus 26 is about reward and punishment. We'll talk about that more in the book of Deuteronomy. And then Leviticus 27 is this weird chapter. It's about redemption prices. And it weirds us out because it's like God's putting a price tag on human beings. And they're like different. Like it's more like men are more expensive than women, male slaves, female slaves, young people, old people. And there's all these different prices. And it feels like really icky when we read it. What we don't understand is what God is doing in this ancient world is God's giving you a way to get people back. Like when you go astray, when you bankrupt yourself and have to sell yourself into slavery, when you do something, he's giving you a way to redeem people back into your household. He's giving you a way to restore people back into the thing.
And this is where context is so important. Because to us, thousands of years later, yeah, this is crazy.
Right.
But when you realize what all of the other nations around them were doing and what their options were when they had a problem.
Correct.
This is revolutionary.
Right. When all these people fit in the same category because they're people, and you realize that in most of the nations around the nation of Israel in the book of Leviticus, women aren't people. Women would be in the same category as livestock. This feels totally different. When you realize, okay, wait, all these people are human beings. And we're recognizing the humanity, not the possession, not the value, not the property, but the human value and their place within a human community. We miss some of that stuff in that historical context. So well said. All right. And all that stuff. So we just went through all those sections of Leviticus, which is cool. But now let's back up. We're going to keep flying up to that 10,000 foot view. You might have even caught this, Brent, if people were listening and they heard me say priest witch. And they're like, wait a minute, there's bread with something in the middle. They might have smelt that sandwich cooking in the back. And they might have been like, that smells like a chiasm sandwich to me.
Yes.
And that's because it is.
I'm imagining like a panini.
Yes.
With like all this juicy ham on it. I know it's not great.
I don't know about Leviticus, but nevertheless. So we do have this chiasm, and you can see it mapped out there on that next slide of your presentation, right? So you have the rituals of redemption, chapters 1 through 7, and the rituals of redemption, chapters 23 through 27. You have the priesthood, chapters 8 through 10, and the priesthood, chapter 21 through 22. You have a holiness code, chapters 11 through 15, and a holiness code, chapters 17 through 20, with the Day of Atonement in the middle. Now, I'll come back to the Day of Atonement in the center of the chiasm in a moment. But Paul is a good friend of ours. Paul once preached a sermon where he pointed out the front half of this Leviticus chiasm is about how I approach God. It's about how I get close to God. The back half of this chiasm is how we help other people get close to God. Just pay attention to that as you watch Leviticus. The rituals, that's about my sacrifice. It's about how I'm brought close to God. It's about how priesthood, it's about the holiness code and how but then on the backside, after the Day of Atonement, everything is about what to do when something goes wrong. What to do when the priests fail. What to do when it's about Sabbath year and year of Jubilee. It's about the party. It's about all of that stuff. These are all, on one half, it's about me approaching God. On the other half, it's about others approaching God. And what sits in the middle of this chiasm? But a whole big, long, drawn-out discussion about the Day of Atonement. Why? Because Leviticus is ultimately about you being made right before God. The whole thing of Leviticus, all this Levitical law, what is it ultimately about? What happens on the Day of Atonement? What does God do with your sin, Brent, on the Day of Atonement? Puts on a scapegoat and what?
And sends it away.
He sends that scapegoat away. Your sins are thrown out the window as far as the east is from the west. The whole book of Leviticus. We always act like the law was like this really oppressive, burdensome thing in the Christian worldview. The law was the gospel. The book of Leviticus is literally a chiasm that reinforces the same gospel truth that we all know, which is that God loves to take your sin and forgive it. That's what God does. That's what the Day of Atonement is. And it's weird because there was a whole chapter on the parties, right, Brent?
Yeah.
It was a chapter of parties in Leviticus.
That's down in 23, 24?
Yeah, 23, 24. And the Day of Atonement, was it listed in those parties?
I don't think so.
It actually was.
Or
it was
is
right there.
Is it listed?
Yep, it's listed
Okay.
right there. But all of a sudden, there's this deep dive. Like, this is so awkward because it doesn't belong in the Holiness Code. It's because it's the center of the chiasm. They're like, we don't need chapter 16 to be this big, huge, drawn-out discussion on the day. It's really odd. It doesn't belong, doesn't fit. It's because it's the whole point of the entire book. The entire book of Leviticus. This whole thing is about how God takes your sin and forgives it. That's who God is. And so I will close by returning to these four roles, Brent. I took longer than I wanted to on today's episode, but it's just so good. So we're going to talk about these four roles. Let's talk about this when it comes to ourselves. Let's self-reflect for a moment. What can we learn from the book of Leviticus? Well, it's not just the Jews. Peter in the New Testament, 2 Peter, 1 Peter, says, you are a holy nation, a royal priesthood called by God. So all of us as Christian followers of Jesus, Jew or Gentile, are called to be a priesthood in this same way. So we ought to reflect on what it means to be a priest. What is a priest? A priest is somebody who puts God on display. Is there anything that we do in our world that shows the world that God is different? Or do we, as Christians, look just like everybody else? And yes, we could talk about material, physical things, the things that we wear, the things that we eat. I think the truth needs to be bigger than that. I think we can get lost in some of those details. But it is good to have something physical and material that I can actually think about in order to wrestle with this. If I don't look different with the way that I consume my goods and the way that I shop, in the way that I ethically chase after my food, in the way that I engage in relationships, in the way that I present myself, wear clothes, in the way that I engage in social media, if there's nothing different about me than everybody else around me, if I'm no different than the nations of the world, if I'm no different than the pagans, I'm missing something, and we could all argue about what it should be, but something should set us apart. Something should be readily obvious in the way that we live. And I'm not talking about the clothes that we wear, and that's how God taught us this principle. But the principle is bigger than the clothes that I wear. The principle is that when people look at my life, they would be like, man, that's different. Why are they different? Oh, because my God is different. Why is your God different? That leads me to helping people navigate their atonement. Do we help people understand who God is, how he's different? Do we help people encounter the belovedness of God? Just 2 episodes ago, we were talking about the tabernacle, and we were talking about how when people meet you, they should fall on their face. The title of the episode was Falling on Joyful Faces. They should fall on their face. They should shout for joy, and they should say, the Lord is good. His love endures forever. That would be a picture of people having navigated their atonement. Do we help people, or do we just make sure that people know they're outsiders? They're wrong. They're sinners. They're going to hell. That's not the job of a priest. The job of a priest is to get them from that place to somewhere where they experience the love, the freedom, the mercy, the forgiveness. We help them navigate that atonement.
And I like how Jesus simplified it. All the law and the prophets are summed up in love God and love your neighbor. That's great. But Leviticus says, okay, we've got a whole bunch of options. Yes. Are you looking at every possible option to get somebody restored in their relationship with God?
Absolutely. And that whole thing fits the chiasm, doesn't it? Front half of the chiasm, love God. Second half of the chiasm, love others. Mm-hmm. It's all over this stuff. So the third role would be interceding on behalf of others. And we as Christians are not known for being people that intercede on behalf of others. We usually make sure that we try to double down on how clearly we think others don't belong. Like, we will go out of our way to make sure that we will stand up for our rights. We will support other people that stand up for a biblical worldview, and the whole time miss an opportunity to intercede on behalf of others. Like, we'll make it so clear that this group of people, they're out, That's an anti-priest move. The priest is supposed to stand in the gap, turn around to God, and fight for any loophole you can possibly think of to get them in. Like that's the priestly role, to intercede on their behalf. And yes, we get to share God's values with them, but we get to find any way to bring them in, to intercede on their behalf. And then lastly, to distribute resources to those in need. It should be one of the roles of God's people as a kingdom of priests, that we would take some of the extra, and oftentimes it's going to be physical, material resources. It's going to be money. It's going to be goods. It could be other things though, too. It could be emotional health. It could be community. It could be relationships. We take the extra and we find people that have the need, and we connect those things together. And when all four of these things come together, you have a royal priesthood, a holy nation, called by God out of darkness into his wondrous light, shining that light to all the nations around us. And that's part of what we can learn from Leviticus. I just want to keep talking for like an hour, Brent, but I gotta probably be done.
Yeah, I started digging in. It's the 1 Peter 2 is where that reference is, and there's actually 2 instances of it, which had me thinking about, like, is Peter making a chiasm here? I don't know.
Oh, goodness. I didn't know that.
But then I'm also meditating on this thing at the end, like, once you had not received mercy, but now you have received mercy. And I think I've always looked at that as, like, once you had not been given mercy, but now you've been given mercy by God. But I think what this is actually about is once I had not actually taken it in, I had not received it, I had not been willing to hold on to this mercy, but now I have. And the Leviticus does not get that much easier to read.
Yes.
I've gone through it, several times. I'm as we record, I haven't quite gotten there yet, but I'm about to go through it again on my readings, and it doesn't really get any easier to read. But man, when I have this framework and I can step back and look at it and realize, like, okay, this is not written to me, but I can see what God is doing here, and it's so amazing.
Absolutely. Very well said.
So we'll be done for today. You can find more details about our show at bamadeception.com. Definitely check out the presentation for this episode. Some of these pictures and diagrams are probably pretty useful if you haven't seen these things before. You can also find those in your podcast app. Scroll down, scroll sideways, whatever it is for you. If you want to get in touch with us, you can use the contact page on the website. That will always have the most up-to-date way to do that. If you want to support our work, you can do that there as well. Everything we do is made possible by people like you who are listening and joining us in this conversation, joining us in this wrestling, and working through this together. So thanks for joining us on the Bama Podcast. We'll talk to you again soon.
Hi, I'm Leanne Dent, a Bama listener in Kirksville, Missouri. And here's the prayer from episode 25's companion. Heavenly Father, thank you for never leaving us. In Egypt, or the desert, or even in days of plenty. For being different, a God who loves his people more than the power over them. May we be a people who partner with you each morning and evening, who put you on display, revealing your heart, who point others to intimate relationship with you so everyone may know they are forgiven, loved, who stand in the gap, taking the outcast in one hand, the other grasping tightly to your mercy, a people who see need and fill it, for the poor, the broken, the lost. You are different. You call us to be different. May we choose to be different as your kingdom of priests, always. Amen.